With NATO building up its presence along Europe's northeastern borders and Russia this month carrying out massive war games of its own, could these rehearsals ever translate into the real thing? And how would the nations on the front line respond if they did? Journalist Eric Campbell has been to the Baltic state of Estonia to find out.
It looks like something out of a fairy tale, and its characters are desperate to live happily ever after.
The Soviet occupation is not so far away at the moment. It's far away for our children.
Pint-sized Estonia has shaken off dictatorship and built a high-tech economy that's the envy of the world. But its old enemy in the east is rising again, and Estonia is gearing up to fight. Taking on the Russian bear means more than boots on the ground. Estonia is pushing cyber defence to the very limit.
We have to be prepared and we have to react if needed.
As they say, if you don't want a war, prepare for a war.
Every spring, when the weather warms up, Estonia is invaded. In the capital Tallinn, it's tourists jostling for space in Europe's hot new destination. A mix of medieval splendour and historical kitsch.
Beware of rats, pigeons, for they also carry the disease of the black.
But 2 hours' drive away in the forest, there's a more aggressive fight for territory. These are NATO's annual war games near the Russian border. This year it's 9,000 troops from 15 countries. They train alongside the Estonian Defence Forces and the Estonian Defence League, a reserve army of volunteers.
Panin siia ka, et siin on muu vigasus, kirjutasin juurde killuhaav vasakus käes.
Maria Turka is a student at Estonia's National Film School. One day she hopes to be a movie director. Today she's learning what to do if a hand grenade explodes in front of her.
We have one guy who lost almost his hand, and we're giving her first aid.
Does it feel a bit more real when you're doing these exercises?
Yeah. Nii, aga transpordiks on ta valmis.
Estonia has been doing these exercises for 15 years, but in the past 3 years, the notion of conflict with Russia has become much more real. People have seen the annexation of Crimea, the outbreak of war in eastern Ukraine, the downing of MH17, and more recently, the cyber attacks on the US and France that many have blamed on Russia. And this is one very small country trying to work out how to defend itself from a giant neighbour. Maria and her friend Kirsten decided to learn combat. They were among hundreds of young women to join the League after Russia invaded its neighbour Crimea.
Because Russia is next to Estonia, so a little bit tougher. So then I was thinking why not come to protect our family or country.
Are people worried about it?
A little bit, yeah. Maybe it's coming, but no, we don't know.
That you want to be ready.
Yeah.
And you're prepared to actually fight in a war.
We're working on it. That's why we're here.
Yeah, you're not frightened of the idea of combat?
Of course I am. War is awful. I don't want to have a war in Estonia. But as they say, if you don't want a war, prepare for a war.
Estonia feels it has good cause to be concerned. In World War II, it was invaded by the Soviet Union, the communist empire dominated by Russia.
Eest tuleb tehnika ka. Eest tuleb autosid.
Kaupo Carusa was a boy when Estonia finally won independence in 1991.
Most of the world doesn't understand the cost of freedom. I'm 38 years old. I remember the Soviet times. I remember Soviet army. And I don't want that back. Freedom is not, it's not granted, as we can see in the world today, even today.
He knows Estonia on its own could never defeat Russia. With a population of just 1.3 million, they're outnumbered 100 to 1.
We're leaving.
But he believes they could inflict enough pain to make Moscow think twice.
We don't exercise to invade other countries. The more we exercise, it's less likely somebody to attack us. That's the thing. Attacking us must be as expensive as possible.
You just have to glance at a map to see why Estonia's wary. It's not only dwarfed by Russia, which is nearly 400 times its size, it's seen how easily Moscow can take back former Soviet territory. In 2014, it captured Ukraine's province of Crimea with barely a shot fired. Moscow sent in soldiers, guns and pop stars, supposedly to protect Crimea's ethnic Russians. Russian media warned they were about to be attacked by Ukraine's new pro-Western government.
Украина. В результате насильственного захвата власти в страну приходит совсем другой режим, наглый, циничный и жестокий.
Russian militias surrounded Ukrainian army bases as separatists held a referendum to formalize the split.
To me, it reminds very much what happened in Estonia in 1940. 16th of June, Soviet troops entered, referendum was staged a month later, and a month later we voluntarily joined Soviet Union. So the scenario is very familiar to the people in Estonia if you talk to them.
Marina Kaljurand is a former ambassador to Russia and has little trust in its president, Vladimir Putin.
Of course we are worried about recent steps. We are worried about unpredictability of Russia. We are worried about violations of our airspace. We do follow the military exercises that do not have defensive or friendly character, but scenarios are rather aggressive ones. So of course we have to take everything into account. We have to be prepared and we have to react if needed.
And conventional war is not the only danger. Estonia has learned the hard way that there are other ways to be attacked. 10 years ago, the Estonian government decided to move a statue from this park that commemorated the Soviet liberation of Tallinn. Well, Russia was outraged. And amid fake news reports that the statue was being destroyed, some Russian speakers in Tallinn went on a rampage. More than 100 people were injured. But the main attack was on the internet. Overnight, websites froze and servers shut down. It's called a denial of service attack, and it was launched from IP addresses across Europe. Estonia was briefly plunged back into the pre-digital age. Russia's government denied any involvement.
I was an Estonian ambassador to Russia then, so of course the question of attribution, who was behind those attacks, was raised. Some of the Russian officials, even officials, were stupid enough to say themselves that they were behind those attacks, or they were part of that attacks, or they took place in those attacks.
NATO, the Western Defence Alliance, saw it as the first cyber war. It set up a cyber defence centre in Tallinn to counter future attacks. Every year it stages complex cyber war games to probe for weakness. The research has helped Estonia develop one of the world's most secure digital networks. If Russia's intention was to scare Estonia, it backfired.
Because it was so, I'll say, out of the blue. I mean, like, it didn't affect our everyday life too much. One bank was down for 1.5 hour again, only. Like, so that was the maximum damage, basically.
Rather than retreating from cyberspace, Estonia decided to double down and make digital development the core of its new economy. The government backed up all its data on foreign servers to prevent disruption. Every citizen was given a unique digital identity to access any government services online, from paying taxes to voting. Taavi Kotka helped design the system and says the public embraced it.
People got used with all these like benefits like e-voting or like paying taxes with 0 click or 1 click, and everything happens like this. Hospitals sharing information, like government institutions sharing information with each other without any paper or like personal interference. So they like that. They like the thing that everything is so efficient.
Once high-speed internet was extended to every part of the country, nobody needed to line up at government offices.
I had a round-the-world trip with my children, and my first stop was in JFK. And you know that there's an immigration and all those ropes forming a line, and my children were asking me like, "Father, what is this?" It's a queue. What is a queue? Because they have never seen a queue. I mean, like, obviously they have seen a like 7-8 person standing in grocery store, like, and waiting, but like organized queue with ropes. I've never seen that.
It all happens online.
Yeah.
Estonia is now one of Europe's most wired countries. This former Soviet industrial estate near Tallinn Airport is becoming a new Silicon Valley. We caught up with Kaupo Karusa, the machine gunner we filmed in the forest. He's a software consultant.
There are like hundreds of services the country is offering us, the government is offering us, and companies like our company, we can use them for free and develop our own thing, which is really, really smart and secure and reliable.
So you basically leapfrog from being a fairly backward Soviet economy to being a very advanced high-tech economy.
We had no choice. We had to do something right.
Little Estonia has developed some of the world's biggest digital products, like the video calling service Skype. But even as it looks to the future, there's always one eye on the Soviet past. Which is why Kaupo alternates his hipster uniform of jeans and t-shirts with military fatigues. But not everyone here fears Russia. Less than 3 hours' drive from Tallinn is the old fortress town of Narva on the Russian border. It's just 2 hours' drive from here to Russia's second city, St. Petersburg. 90% of Narva's residents speak Russian. Most, like Vladimir Chedakov, feel Russian.
Это русский город или эстонский город, по-вашему?
Русский город,
Да?
да, который находится на территории Эстонии, я бы так сказал.
More than a quarter of Estonia's population hails from Russia. As in Crimea, many of their families moved across in Soviet times when they were the same country. Narva and its neighbour Ivangorod were effectively the same town. But in 1991, they were suddenly cut off. People now need visas to visit family and friends across a heavily patrolled border.
Я сам житель Советского Союза и гражданин был Советского Союза, и служил в советской армии. И волею судьбы в один день проснулись в другой стране.
Despite finding himself on the Estonian side, Vladimir Cherdakov remains proud of his heritage. Twice a week he rehearses with a Russian folk group in Narva's castle, a symbol of a long history of conflict. Danish occupiers built it in the 13th century as they advanced on Russia. In the 15th century, Tsar Ivan III built an even bigger fortress directly opposite. It's now the only place in the world where two fortresses face each other across a border.
В принципе, русский житель Нарвы более-менее нормально относится и к Путину, и к России. Но воевать никто не хочет. Если только, я говорю, какая-то третья сила не спровоцирует этот конфликт. Но он не нужен никому. И России он тоже не нужен. Если думают, что это Россия инициатор каких-то, я не верю в это.
Of course, Russia did support separatists in Ukraine and Georgia. But the Russian community here is different. Nobody's that keen to rejoin the motherland.
Что вы скажете людям, которые думают, что Нарва станет следующим Крымом?
Это бред. Вот так, по большому счету, потому что ни предпосылок нет, ни разговоров, ни желания у людей. Я говорю, все хотят просто жить и растить детей, и зарабатывать денежку, отдыхать, ездить куда хотят, куда захочется. И то есть...
While he doesn't see trouble coming from the Russian side, he does blame one group for stirring up the neighbourhood: NATO.
Все пытаются этого медведя уколоть, а зачем? Мне кажется, если бы у нас на территории Эстонии не было бы ни натовских баз, ни столько военщины, жилось бы спокойнее.
This year's NATO operation was called Spring Storm. 2 weeks of war games leading up to a major battle.
Are you conscripts or professionals?
The commander of the Estonian Defence Forces, General Riho Terras, told us it was minor compared to what Russia was planning for September.
Russians are exercising in more than 100,000 people, so it is... I think the only provocation I can see is if we don't do anything. I think Ukraine provoked enough in Crimea, not doing anything. So, no provocation from our side.
You're ready, you're prepared?
Yes, we're ready, we're prepared, and we're not afraid.
But this year, Vladimir Putin wasn't the only president causing concern. US troops were taking part in the games, but their new commander-in-chief, Donald Trump, had called NATO obsolete while praising Putin.
Estonia is in the suburbs of St. Petersburg.
His campaign team had even questioned if the US would defend a NATO member.
I'm not sure I would risk nuclear war over some place which is the suburbs of St. Petersburg.
This year's war games were a pointed demonstration that NATO would fight a conventional war.
The day of the major battle of Spring Storm. We've been allowed inside the battle zone, hence this. There'll be no live ammunition used today, just blanks, but otherwise everything is going to be done as real as possible.
Mock battles are soon raging around us.
See the team that withdrawing?
We find ourselves caught on the Estonian side, being hunted down by Brits.
So we're kind of on the run at the moment. This unit came under attack in the field from all sides, so they're heading back in the armoured personnel carrier to the trenches to make a stand. Man down! Man down! Man down! Man down! We got an injured one here.
Unlike a real war, it's all over in a day.
You're going home.
Okay,
You're going home.
But the real battle was just beginning. As soldiers gathered for the closing ceremony, NATO leaders were converging on Brussels for their first meeting with Donald Trump. General Terras was playing down the differences.
Hereby, I call your nations back to the next year's exercise in order to show the strengths of alliance, which is today shown in Brussels in a couple of hours' time.
NATO members must finally contribute.
The alliance's 28 other members hoped Trump would affirm the NATO doctrine that an attack on one was an attack on all. Instead, he attacked them for not paying their bills.
This is not fair to the people and taxpayers of the United States. And many of these nations owe massive amounts of money from past years.
Some European leaders seemed dismayed. But Estonia's Prime Minister, Jüri Ratas, says his meeting with Trump left him reassured.
First of all, I told him that Estonia is a strong supporter for NATO, and also that Estonia keep our promises. For example, our defense expenditure is this year more than 2%, actually 2.17.
Well, a lot of people talk about Donald Trump's attitude. You actually met him. What did he say to you?
United States is behind the NATO. Of course, it's very important to fight against terrorism, but also he said that Russia is also the threat.
Even with the nagging fear of war, Estonians are getting on with life. Caught between great powers from the east and west, their land has been fought over since the 13th century.
The longest period of freedom in Estonian history is at the moment. And we are hoping it will last for years and for decades.
Yeah, I'm sure it lasts.
Kaupo Carusa and his wife Ega hope their children won't have to worry about fighting.
The Soviet occupation is not so far away at the moment. It's far away for our children. They haven't seen it.
I think they're smarter and they have more opportunities, not only because of this digital world, but
their
everything.
mind is free. Their mind is free.
Yes.
This is very, very important.
I think it's like evolution also, like every generation is smarter, they have more experience and so on and so on. So.
And you're building on that.
Yeah.
Okay.
He seems pretty smart.
If Estonia can avoid war, this will be the first generation in 800 years to be free of foreign domination. And that really would be a fairy tale ending.